Good morning, New Brunswick, and welcome to a very special episode of the New Brunswick Today show. My name is Charlie Cradaville. It's been a big week. Take a look at this dude, Paul Manafort. President Trump's campaign manager was indicted by a federal grand jury, that was put together by Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller. He wasn't the only one indicted. His close associate, Richard Gates, also indicted. Serious crimes they're accused of by the grand jury. They are now awaiting trial. They did have to surrender themselves and be processed. And that's not all. Another dude, George Papadopoulos, one of Trump's campaign advisors, one of his foreign policy advisors, pled guilty. No need for an indictment. He admitted that he lied to FBI agents who were investigating this case. So that is a big deal for our criminal president, who has now got more headaches than you could possibly imagine. Two of his close campaign aides in legal trouble, another actually pleading guilty and potentially working with the prosecutor to help build an even stronger case against the Trump administration and the Trump campaign. So stay tuned for more on that. We also, speaking of indictments, have a couple of new ones to report right here out of New Brunswick. This is the two folks we've been following the story of, Mr. Joseph Jojo DeBonis and Billy Ortiz. They are both longtime officials at the New Brunswick Water Utility who were suspended last December over a bribery scheme. They were accused of lowering bills for certain landlords, property owners in the city in exchange for corrupt payments. The Attorney General's office of the state of New Jersey has been prosecuting that case, and well, they actually secured indictments on September 28th. You can read the full story on our fantastic NewBrunswickToday.com website. Encourage you to check that out. And the reason it's a special show today is because we've got an election coming up, and we're very, very happy to be joined this morning by one of the candidates who wants to be your next governor in New Jersey. This is Mr. Seth Kaper-Dale. Thanks for joining us.
Charlie, thanks so much for having me.
So, you've been on the show before. You're a local leader. You've been, fighting these fights for longer than we've even had this newspaper, this organization. Your day job, though, is you're a pastor.
Yes.
A preacher at the Reformed Church of Highland Park. And some folks, it just rubs them the wrong way that, a religious leader is running for a political office. What do you say to those people who, are rubbed the wrong way by that?
So I would say that, first of all, every human being is formed by something. I happen to be shaped largely by my faith and my tradition, and that my day job happens to be as a pastor. If I became governor of the state of New Jersey, that job would fall away, but the person that I am, that's been shaped by my day job and by my family and by my life, that's part of who I am. So I'm sorry if people see it that way. You should get to know what it means to be a pastor, though, if you're going to critique it. So to me, being a pastor means fighting for peace and justice and fighting for the way of love. So it means building affordable housing as a church. I have taken the roof of my church and turned it into a housing complex for women aging out of foster care. It means fighting against the Iraq War and protesting with every other religious and non-religious person who is angry about the Iraq War, and then responding by building housing for homeless veterans. As we didn't get our way as a people in staying out of that war, we started a campaign. If we can spend billions to kill, we can at least spend millions to rebuild lives, and we build housing for homeless veterans in our town. It's about being concerned about folks who are in jail and building reentry housing, and really believing that if we're going to address the issues of mass incarceration, part of what we have to do is cut back on recidivism by giving people the real things they need as they come out of prison. So for me, that's what it means to be a pastor and a community activist. Those are two titles I think of for myself, and a community organizer, and a starter of 501c3. So that's all part of who I am, and I hope people can see past whatever stigma they have if they think that being a pastor means you dislike LGBT people, you're wrong. I marry more gay people than straight people. If you think it means that I'm anti-abortion at all costs, you're wrong. I have a very nuanced position on that and believe that it's a woman's right to choose and that government should in no way step in whatsoever on that matter. So hopefully that can put people at ease.
Yeah, and so you're not running with one of the major, corporate-backed parties. You're running with the third party, the Green Party. And tell us, what do you have to say to folks who, maybe don't see themselves as third-party voters, see themselves as in this dynamic of having to choose between as they say, the lesser of two evils? What would you say to folks who say, don't throw your vote away by supporting a third-party candidate?
So what I would say is that I'm actually running for the first party. Okay, the Democrats and the Republicans split 39% of registered voters last time we had a gubernatorial election, and more people voted for the Republican than the Democrat. So Chris Christie won because he had the majority of the 39% of registered voters that showed up at the polls. So the first party is the party that represents those who feel so disenfranchised and so left out that they have not engaged in the political process. I have been running a first party campaign believing that the last are first. And that's the theme of my campaign, the last are first. I've spent 12 months now. I've been out 320 times, mainly in places where there's a huge number of people who didn't go to the polls last time because they've been so disenfranchised for so many decades that they don't believe that either of the two corporate options have any benefit in their life whatsoever, and they've thrown their hands up and are not participating. So I think I'm going to shock some people because I've been running for the majority, not for the minority, which is the Democrats and the Republicans.
Yeah, and so it's kind of an uphill battle, of course. You were excluded from the government-sponsored debates. There were two of them that the two parties got to participate in, and really the only reason was that you didn't raise enough money. It wasn't that you didn't have enough support or enough
Right. No, I had all the signatures to get on the ballot. I've raised over $100,000, which is the most a Green Party candidate has ever raised, and it's by far the most of any independent or third-party candidate this time around. So yeah, I would have hoped I could be in those debates, but partly I want to say the people I'm going for aren't watching those debates anyway. I'm on the ground, on my feet, meeting people in community. And even this week, when I'm going out and asking people, do you know the name of who's running for the Democrat or the Republican? They don't know the name of the two people running. So that gives me hope that they know my name. And I would like to shock middle, upper, and wealthy New Jersey by really showing that the poor have somebody who's standing with them this time around. The last shall be first is a message that resonates with a huge number of people in the state of New Jersey.
And so let's talk about your two main opponents, since you are the underdog. Let's hear, what do you have to say about the Democrat candidate, Phil Murphy? He's favored to win. Do you think he would be a decent governor, or where do you stand on him and his policies?
Right. So people always say to me, is it hard to run as a progressive when there's somebody so far left who's running as the Democrat? And I laugh when I hear that, because a Goldman Sachs executive is not so far left. This is somebody who's made his near $1 billion off the neoliberal disaster capitalism of the day. That's the crucible in which he's formed. So to look at somebody coming out of that crucible and claim the word progressive, it's just a misnomer. It's really embarrassing to me that the Democratic Party in the state of New Jersey chose a Goldman Sachs exec in the year of Bernie Sanders. It just shows how out of touch they are with a huge percentage of Democrats who really do want a real progressive in office. So I'm sort of shocked that people have let him get away with that as a title. And there's some things that he won't talk about that he needs to talk about if he wants the title of progressive. He won't talk about single-payer Medicare for all. And single-payer Medicare for all is not only important for the health care of all of us, but I think it's the single best economic solution for the state of New Jersey. And the fact that he won't talk about it is because he is funded hugely by the health insurance industry, and he won't touch that industry. So George Norcross, is the sort of kingpin of all this, and he's Mr. Health Insurance himself. So he's not going to talk about the thing that would actually bring down taxes in every single town in the state of New Jersey. 20% of the taxes that everyone pays in all 565 municipalities goes to unregulated health insurance industry costs associated with providing care to teachers and municipal workers. We want teachers and municipal workers to get excellent health care, but we don't want to have towns get fleeced by a private industry. Why wouldn't a progressive talk about that? We could bring taxes down in every single town, far more than either Phil or Kim are talking about with single-payer Medicare for all. It's been embarrassing that they won't talk about it. He also won't talk about closing youth prisons, and this one really bugs me. There's a huge effort right now to say that 150 years is enough. Jamesburg and Hayes have been having kids locked up as if they were adults in New Jersey. There's 300 approximately kids in jail in New Jersey. 285 of them are black, 15 are white. It's like a 25-to-1 ratio or something, 24-to-1 ratio of black to white in terms of racial disparity in our youth jails. And why won't Phil Murphy talk about that? Because he's beholden to some union jobs where it's $200,000 per kid to lock up kids in jail, even though we know recidivism among kids who've been locked up is ridiculously high. And most other states have come up with better solutions.
So how about the other major party candidate, the Lieutenant Governor, Kim Mutanga? What do you think about her policies and her campaign so far?
So on the positive side, let me just say one thing. I think she's absolutely right to be talking about taxes. And I've been shocked at the Goldman Sachs Democrats' inability to talk in any sort of articulate way about economics and about taxes. She's at least been talking about it, and it's something that voters in New Jersey are worried about. And as somebody who cares about the last are first, the high rents that impact poor families, it's all related to property taxes. So I'm with that from her, that we need to be talking about that. So I was kind of shocked when she went off the rails and started going into this anti-immigrant stuff so strong in the last month. It's an embarrassment. She is desperate, clearly, and she's pandering to Trump sort of mentality. And sadly, she's just shaking loose here in the state of New Jersey some of the same hate that we've seen around the country. So, Kim, that's a pitiful way to end this thing.
Yeah. So tell me more about that. That's really your primary issue, I would say, your signature issue.
It's the issue that has put me on the map in New Jersey, but it's not my signature issue for what I believe is important for the state of New Jersey. But I'm very happy to talk with you about it.
Yeah. Well, please let folks know your history with the immigration issue, because it's kind of the preeminent topic of this year, especially in Middlesex County, and especially lately.
Yes.
But you've been fighting that fight since before it was cool, so to speak.
Yeah, that's right.
You tell us about your history and what you think
in
about
2002, Attorney General John Ashcroft came up with the first Muslim registration. Everyone forgets that. We had one called NSEERS. And if you were a male aged 15 to 65 from the largest 24 Muslim countries in the world, you had to go report to ICE or be considered a terrorist fugitive. It was 1 year after 9/11. Everyone was on high alert, and it was a horrible thing, but it was implemented. I happened to have a congregation that was worshiping in my building on Sunday evenings that were Indonesians, the largest Muslim country in the world, but they happened to be Christian. They went and registered for this registry because it wasn't based on religion, it was based on
nation of origin.
Yeah. So they went and registered, and because they registered, they became low-hanging fruit for ICE anytime ICE wanted to up its deportation numbers. So first under G.W. Bush, we had the Return to Sender program in 2006. I had 35 Indonesians rounded up and deported in one night. 80 kids made fatherless, not because their dads walked out, but because our government decided to walk in and break up families and create economic chaos and emotional chaos that's still lasting with families. So that's kind of how I got involved in this. Since that time, I've written bills that have been before the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives called the Indonesian Refugee Family Protection Act. I had 9 individuals live in my building for all of 2012. I have cut the ankle monitors off immigrants before who've come to the church, and they've decided they want to leave for their country of origin and couldn't leave because they had an ankle monitor stuck on their leg. So I had this interesting experience of garden clippers to remove people from the bondage that ICE had put them under that was now preventing them from leaving with dignity on their own. Just ridiculous stuff. Right now we have a couple living in sanctuary again in our building. And this morning we had U.S. federal marshals at the door of my church at 8 o'clock.
This morning?
And they left before I got there, but the person who was standing sentry, we have someone who's awake in the building all night long just for this sort of thing, called me. I was at a breakfast meeting to say, get back here, there's the U.S. Marshals here looking for you. By the time I got there, they'd said, actually, we don't need to meet with that pastor. I think they were afraid I was going to bring the media. And I would have. So it's very much an active thing. In terms of the sanctuary state policies, this is what I want to say.
Yeah.
Yes, the police in this state should have absolutely nothing to do with immigration. These are apples and oranges. It has never been the role of immigration to play a part in taking care of the criminal justice system. If we want to have a criminal justice system that is fair and accountable and where people dare call the police, we need to make sure that this is not tied in any way to immigration. You're going to have real crimes that are committed that people are going to be afraid to call about because of the fact that they're worried about what that will mean to families and community that happen to have some folks who are undocumented. So we need to keep ICE and our police completely separated. So sanctuary, to be a real sanctuary state means we have to do that. But there's two things that I think need to be added if we're going to be a sanctuary state with teeth. First of all, and I think I might have told you this in the last interview, I think that the NICSEL alert system that every town utilizes when there's a water main break or a tree down on Main Street should also be used to inform the public when it is that the hate crime president is carrying out racial and ethnic cleansing in our communities. If ICE is in our towns trying to break up families, an alert should go out from the town saying, stay away from Fifth Avenue, or ICE is active on Fifth Avenue, so that people who have documentation issues know not to go out. And those of us with our social media cameras or whatever, we can come and document what's happening. And those who want nothing to do with it can know to stay away. So that's one of the things I would add. And the second thing I would add, in the spirit of Archbishop Oscar Romero from El Salvador, who was shot and killed in the early 80s, every week he would read aloud the names of those who had been killed by the government, peasants who'd been killed by the government because of the uprising going on in that country. I would like every week to read not the names because I don't want to get other family members in trouble, but I'd like to name the description of families that have been impacted every single week, and like a radio show as governor or a TV show, something where we could say who it is or how it is that ICE is destroying our families. Because we're going to find during this Trump presidency that after a couple of years, we will have lost thousands of people from our community because of racial and ethnic cleansing. And we need to be documenting this. We need to be apologizing to communities. And we need to be recognizing while it's going on what is happening. I don't want my kids to say to me in a few years, Daddy, where were you when all of those thousands of kids lost their parents to deportation? I want to say I was right in the middle of it. That's the only thing I want to say. And as governor, I would make sure that happens.
Now, you're a local guy. You're one of two candidates from Middlesex County that want to be the governor. Tell me about what brought you to this part of the state in the first place and what you like about it, what you might do to make it better if you get elected.
So I went to Princeton Theological Seminary, and my wife and I looked for churches afterward. And actually, it was the New Brunswick Theological Seminary president who specifically reached out to Highland Park and said, call that couple and have them come up for an interview. So that's how we landed here back in 2001.
Originally from Vermont?
I'm from Vermont, and I lived in Vermont till I was 18, then Michigan for college, then Ecuador for a year of living with street kids, and then to Princeton, and then to here. That's my story in a nutshell. But the things that would benefit this county, first of all, single-payer Medicare for all. If we had single-payer Medicare, every single municipality in this county would see property taxes go down. And that would be good. If we had single-payer Medicare, the state pension fund and the benefit fund, the big issue that everybody's concerned about, wouldn't be an issue anymore. Because the reason we can't pay the pension every year is because the benefit piece is so high. And why is the benefit piece so high? We're paying a for-profit entity that kicks those grades up higher and higher every year. If we had it regulated with a 6% payroll tax, that would come down dramatically, which would allow the state then not only to cover its pension, but it would also allow the state to have other money to help fully fund the school funding formula. So on every front, local towns in the county, and this is true statewide, would benefit. In terms of businesses, a lot of businesses can't hire more employees because of why? The incredibly high cost of for-profit health insurance. So it keeps you from hiring more people. If that's covered now through a single-payer plan, then local businesses can hire people and give a better wage. I really believe 15 now is something that makes people nervous, but it's something that should be done and can be done if we're paying for our health care in a different way. So those are some of the benefits that folks can see right away.
So New Jersey is an expensive state to live in. So you just to be clear, you support $15 per hour minimum wage
absolutely,
immediately for all workers.
Yes.
In the state.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have all these social justice issues. That you obviously have thought a lot about.
Yeah.
How about some of the maybe more mundane issues like transportation? A lot of people have watched the quality of NJ Transit go down, the fares go up, and what would you do about that in this state where transportation is so important?
So we do need the tunnel to the city, okay?
Yeah.
We need to do that, and we need to get serious about these things. I'll be honest that I have not poured as much time and attention into the details of a transit plan as I would have liked to at this point. I've been focusing on other things, but without a doubt, that's a big piece of it. Secondly, we need to make sure that the transit system that we have becomes greener. A big reason why we are not doing our part to cut down on the poisoning of this planet is because of our inability to make public transportation more with renewable energy sources. So we need to do that right away. I have a public bank idea. I know that the Democrat has a public bank idea too, and I wish I had heard more details about his public bank. But one of the main things that we hope we would pay for through the public bank would be things related to transportation. So municipalities, if they wanted to get buses, if they wanted to green their buses, they could reach into the New Jersey Public Bank and utilize it for purposes such as that.
You touched on the environment, obviously the climate crisis, one of the biggest issues facing our planet. What else would you do to tackle that besides greening the vehicles that might be on the road?
Absolutely. I mean, so I've participated a lot in the different efforts to stop pipelines over this past year. So I joined the Pilgrim Pipeline Walk, the 90-mile walk, for 2 days of that 6-day sojourn. I participated. We need to stop all oil and gas pipelines in this state. The state has more pipelines running through it than we would ever need on the highest energy usage day, of the year. I think it's something like 68% more oil and gas available to the state of New Jersey on the day of highest consumption possible. So we're in really good shape right now in terms of having what we need. So we need to stop with that. Instead, I'd like to put our energy into a different kind of pipelines, and that's the water pipelines throughout the state. The lead in the water has been a big focus of my campaign. Throughout the summer, we became concerned that the DEP was not finding a better way to publicize the federal action level lead levels that were being identified in Milltown, right here in our county, and Newark. Those are two of the towns this year that had lead levels far higher than Flint, Michigan.
Right.
So we've been trying to emphasize that all year. So that's another thing we're doing environmentally.
Cool. Tell us a little bit more about that. The issues that you found in Milltown. They were on the DEP website, but they weren't exactly, advertised. You were the one who shined, drew some attention to that. So tell us about what you would do to fix that.
So once again, I believe that the public bank is part of the solution for this. So it is without question that it's going to be a very, very costly effort to get lead out of our system. Up until 1986 or 87, I can't remember if it's 86 or 87, there was lead in the solder in all of the pipes in people's homes. So even if we have clean water all the way up to somebody's home, the water that sits in your pipes is going to have lead in it, and especially now because over time, more and more of that lead leaches out of the solder and into your water. So what I found in Milltown that really upset me is in talking to one council member, he was very dismissive of it. He said, I can't believe you're drawing attention to this, making a big deal out of it.
Downplaying it.
Yeah, like if they had just tested a couple different houses, we wouldn't have hit that level, and no one would be making a big deal out of this. And I kind of felt like that was, but that's not what happened. There was a test, and it did show a high level of lead. And this isn't the first time in Milltown that this has happened.
Yes.
They had it like a year or 2 years ago, and because of that, they've had more frequent testing. And in their more frequent testing, it still measures high. So, our council members have to get serious about this. Every single municipality needs to get serious, and the government too. So the public bank is another thing that could be used to help towns address this crisis. I believe that we should be letting every homeowner know that there's lead in potentially lead in their homes. We should be giving folks the ability to get their home tested, and if the lead level is high, then we should be finding a way to pay for filters in homes in the state of New Jersey. And we can do that by utilizing the public bank.
Okay. New Brunswick, huge hub of education. We've got the state university. We've got a part of the county college here. The theological seminary, of course. The big issue is how are the students supposed to pay for that education?
Yeah, right.
And without mortgaging their future by taking out so much debt. What are you going to do to make it easier for those kids to pay down their education, or for future students?
Charlie, I feel like a broken record. Single payer Medicare for all. Why can't the state pay more money to help with the cost of tuition? Because the state is so busy paying exorbitant costs to cover the unregulated health insurance costs associated with running our colleges, our universities, and our county colleges too. If we could get New Jersey's single-payer Medicare for all, it would leave way more money for us to redirect toward bringing down the cost of tuition. I've been concerned with Phil Murphy's plan, honestly, to cut tuition at the county colleges and to not say anything about how to bring down costs at universities. To me, that runs the risk of directing folks who are poorer to a certain type of education. And I don't think that that's fair. We have a public education that gives everybody the equal opportunity to shape their mind and shape themselves in a way that may apply to different types of schools. And we shouldn't be setting up the financial incentives to drive folks to one sort of school or another. There should be something that's happening at all of our institutions to bring down the cost.
So, final question, I want to ask you to talk about your experience here in Middlesex County. We've basically been under one-party rule for as long as I can remember. The mayor, the council here in New Brunswick, the freeholder board, the congressman, the state senate, the assembly, all Democrat officials. Some people would say better than the other party. But what's your actual experience with dealing with the local and the county government here, and tell me how that informed your decision to run and why you want to shake up that system.
Yeah. So my answer may be a little different than I don't know what you're thinking I would say about this, but I've had very positive interactions with this county in terms of getting funding to help build housing for homeless veterans, funding to help build housing for women aging out of foster care, funding to build housing for chronically homeless mentally ill adults. I've had people who've been very receptive at the county level and at the local municipal levels who happen to be Democrats, because it's mainly Democrats. So first I want to say that I'm not the kind of person who ever just drags a whole group under the bus and says you're all junk or anything like that. I don't feel that way at all. But I do think that if you're not challenged sometimes by people with different views and stronger views, you run the risk of just that, of not being challenged. So at the state level, I'm totally offended by the Democratic Party at the state level. It's run by a handful of bosses, and the way that they threw Barbara Buono under the bus, and not just Barbara, but all the voters who vote Democrat. The Democrats in the primary wanted her. And before they got to November 4 years ago, the bosses had undone her, and they'd all come out supporting Chris Christie. That is really the reason I decided to run, and to run as a Green. I said I'll never vote Democrat again at the state level in the state. It's a filthy, disgusting institution that's run by George Norcross and a couple of other people. The fact that they got Barbara Buono out of there despite the will of the Democratic voters, and this time they chose a Goldman Sachs candidate before the Democratic voters even had a chance to hear who the other options were. It's all a very, very sick system, and I want nothing to do with it. So Instead, I decided to go green. We believe in people, planet, peace over profit. People say it's a long shot, but I say it's only a long shot if you're not looking at the facts that 61% of the people in this state did not vote for either party. I'm going for the majority. You can fight over who's second and third, but I'm first.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, Reverend Seth Kaper-Dale, he'll be on your ballots November 7th, hoping to be your next governor. Thanks again for joining us. Stay tuned, everybody. We've got a couple more interviews coming up this morning with candidates that'll be on the ballot. And then tomorrow we'll be back with Matthew Riccardi, who wants to be your governor. And Sunday we'll have Gina Genovese, who also wants to be your governor. So keep watching this Facebook page, New Brunswick Today. We'll be back in a bit with more interviews.